Hello and welcome back to the Guides.Global discussion about buying property in Bulgaria. My name's John Howell. I am the Editorial Director of Guides.Global, and with me today we have Lyubov Jones, who, despite her name, is a practicing Bulgarian lawyer working both in the UK and in Bulgaria. Lyubov, welcome back. This section is about the process of buying property in Bulgaria, and we want to go through the whole thing really from when you first become interested to the point where you've got your good legal title registered at the land registry. In most countries in the world, the process of buying a property can be a little bit long drawn out and complicated because there are contracts to sign and things to think about. From your perspective, as someone who's worked both in the UK and in Bulgaria, is the process in Bulgaria any more complicated than it is, for example, in Spain or France or the UK?
No, I don't think that the process is more complicated. I could say that even simpler than in these countries and more take a shorter time to buy from the beginning, from checks that you start from.
Typically, how long would it start from the time when you found a property you wanted to buy to the time when you got your title deed?
If you buy a ready-made property, already existing, yes, then you can finish all the process within 1 month.
So that's pretty quick, really.
It's very quick, but you need to really work very rapidly on everything. But more relaxing time is up to 2 months.
Okay, but still not a huge length of time
No.
compared to some countries.
No.
And if you are going through that process, it may seem more complicated to you because, of course, you may have bought property in your own country many times and be vaguely familiar with it, whereas the process in Bulgaria will be different from the process you're used to at home.
Yes.
And, of course, a lot of the documents will be in Bulgarian.
Yes, yes, in Bulgarian language, and the translation in English, you could require it for people involved in the purchase, but you should reassure that you have a Bulgarian reader person, and especially legally
Yes.
educated, and not only legally educated, a lawyer.
Okay, well, let's start right at the beginning. There are some things that you ought to do before you go looking at properties. In other words, preparation, getting some basic things organized. Can we just talk about one or two of those? There's always the question, isn't there, about who should be the owner of the property that you're going to buy. You have to think about in whose name you want to put the property. So, for example, if my wife and I were going to buy a property in Bansko, we might decide to put it in both of our names, or we might decide to put it in just one name, or sometimes the children's names, and so on and so on. There are lots and lots of choices. Do you advise clients to clear this up before they start looking at property, or are you quite happy for them to find the house first and for you then to deal with the question of who should be the owner?
You generally ask your client when he approaches you in which name you want the property and what is the reason. If you see that the client hesitates in which name to put the property, you provide him with proper legal advice.
Yes.
On the best options for him.
So, apart from the question of who should own the property, I think there are some other things perhaps we need to think about before they go looking. Why are they buying? Where are they going to buy? And how are they going to finance it? I don't know whether you find this, but it's surprisingly often that I find husbands and wives who are thinking of going and buying a property somewhere, and they have radically different thoughts as to why they're buying it. One of them's thinking that they're going to go there every weekend, and the other's thinking they're going to rent it out and make some money out of it.
Yeah.
Do you find that as well?
Yes, I find recently I have the case that a wife said to me that she even didn't know that she's on a title.
Right. Lucky
they
wife.
own this property for a number of years.
Yes.
And, therefore, you're absolutely right.
Yes.
Sometimes they have no idea, or just rely upon each other Oh, forget just. If the property
Yes.
is not expensive, they just forget about it.
Okay, next thing I want to look at is finding the property. Estate agents we've touched on earlier on. I mean, most people in Bulgaria will find a property through an estate agent. Is that correct?
It's correct. It's not very popular to do private sales.
Notaries. In some countries, the notary, as part of his job, gets involved in the process, not of just the legal work and the transfer of title, but also the process of selling properties. And that's not so in Bulgaria, is it?
Not, notaries in Bulgaria do not deal with sales.
So you don't need to think about that.
Yes.
Developers, on the other hand, very often do sell their own properties, don't they? They don't necessarily operate through estate agents, many of them do, but you could find that the developer has his own sales department.
Correct. And mainly they prefer it because all the profits will go in
They're not paying
to the
X%
developer.
to the agent.
Exactly.
Yes.
Or they set up their own estate agency that deals only with the sale of their property. But mainly developers in Bulgaria, if it's a big developer, prefers to sell their own properties.
And the final thing I wanted to cover in this section was property finders. Now, in a growing number of countries, we have people who are not estate agents, but they are your agent. They are going out to do your research for you and maybe going into villages where you don't speak the language and finding a beautiful house that is available for sale, perhaps because someone's just died. Do they exist in Bulgaria, or is this not something that's hit the Bulgarian market yet?
No, it's not very popular in Bulgaria. Nobody would trust to such people. There are some people there who wants to deal with, they act like an intermediary man and to find a property, but it's not popular.
And of course, if those people are not registered estate agents, then you don't have any of the protection you get when it comes to dealing with an estate agent.
Correct. They haven't got the legal rights to deal with
Yes.
finding the property.
So, okay, that's finding a property. Now let's imagine that you found the property that you want to buy. And I think most of us know within about 5 seconds of arriving within a property whether it's something we want to buy or not. How do you go about making an offer?
If you're buying through the estate agent or either through the developer, you just, in order to take the property off the market, you will pay a little deposit, up to 500 euros, and you will sign the reservation form, and later you will sign either the broker contract with the estate agent, or you may sign the preliminary contract with the developer.
Okay, so let's stick with the reservation first of all. So small deposit, and that's paid across to the estate agent, and you sign this short document saying, yes, I wish to reserve this property for a price of X and for a period of however long.
Correct.
And that is absolutely normal in Bulgaria. If someone asks you for that, you shouldn't be worried about it.
Yes, it's absolutely normal.
Yes. So then the next stage is you will go on and sign a more formal contract, either a preliminary purchase contract or, as you say, a broker contract. What's the difference between the two?
The broker contract is the negotiations between the client and the estate agent. The preliminary contract is negotiations between the seller, the real owner of the property, and the buyer. Unless the estate agent holds the document, holds the contract, type of errant contract, that gives him the right to sell the developer's properties.
So if you have gone to an estate agent who is not the agent who's been instructed by the seller to sell the property, who doesn't have the mandate or the authority from the seller to sell, but he introduces you to the property, then you will sign a broker contract which will say, thank you for doing that, I am going to pay you 2% or 3% or whatever it might be as your fee. So that's what the broker contract is.
Yes. Yeah.
And then the preliminary purchase contract is the contract you sign with the seller to say, right, I want to buy this property, and that will contain all the usual clauses, which we'll come back to in a minute.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. If you do agree to buy a property, is there any sort of legal cooling off period during which you can change your mind? If you sign a preliminary purchase contract, for example, do you have any legal right to cancel within 7 days or 10 days or 2 weeks. Some countries that exists.
Yes, I know that in some countries, but not in Bulgaria.
Not in Bulgaria. So
yes.
once you've signed your preliminary purchase contract, it is a legally binding done deal.
Absolutely.
And you'll have paid across a deposit, and if you don't go ahead, you will lose your deposit.
Yes, yes. Unless you negotiated in the contract the condition in which you can terminate the contract.
Exactly. So when it comes to preliminary purchase contracts, there may well be some special clauses in there, which I always call get-out clauses, that say, okay, I've agreed to buy this, but if I don't get a mortgage offer within 2 months, then the deal's off. Or if when we get the survey, it's falling down, the deal is off.
Yeah, you need to be very careful with the clauses regarding termination of the contract and leave it to your legal representative to deal with this, because there are very specifics in type of writing of these clauses, and therefore in order to prevent any mistakes.
And they have to be particularly clear.
Yes, correct.
Yes.
Correct.
So again, very important point, if there's anything like that's worrying you, you need to speak to your lawyer, get it included in the contract as quickly as possible.
Correct.
Okay, so you've now put in an offer, the offer's been accepted, and you are going to go ahead and buy the property. And in part of that process, you'll want to do some checks on the property, won't you? What they call due diligence.
Correct.
Now, we're sometimes asked what due diligence is. Basically, it's just finding out whether what you've been told is true. So what due diligence as a lawyer are you going to carry out if you're buying a property in Bulgaria?
Okay, you first of all, you check the title. You check the property at the land registry. That's the first and basic thing that you can and should complete. For mortgages and for ownership, whether the seller is the real owner, then you need to check the plans, the property plans, to see whether the plans comply with the reality, with the description of the property.
And whether all the work's been approved.
Yes, exactly. It depends on the state of the property, whether you buy it under construction or ready-made property. You will see to check whether the property has been certified with specific building documents, as a habitation certificate, for example, or other documents that should be at this stage of completion. Different kind of this type of checks.
And what about checks on the state of the property, the condition of the property? I know the lawyer won't do that, but would you normally recommend you get an inspection or a survey carried out, or is that not common in Bulgaria?
It's not common in Bulgaria unless you go to buy some property in a rural location. Then it probably will be wise to send some surveyor there.
Okay. So that's the due diligence, and at the end of doing all of those things, the lawyer will produce a report for you saying, this is what I found out?
No. Generally, Bulgarian lawyers do not produce any reports in writing. They just confirm, maybe via emails, if they communicate in such a way with the client, that everything is done. And
so they'll just say, I've checked everything that's necessary and it's okay.
Yeah, they do. I don't, because I produce a written report as I work with in the UK and comply with I know what the British clients expect from me, but mostly Bulgarian lawyers still avoid write to clients.
Putting things in writing is dangerous, they think, whereas not putting things in writing is dangerous, we think. Due diligence is done, you've reported back to the client, and we can then go ahead with the transaction. Just one small point, and that is about the value of the property. Now, in many countries, it is quite common for someone to have an independent valuation of the property carried out, an appraisal in the US they call it, before they will go ahead and buy. Is that common in Bulgaria or not?
No, it's not common. The valuation only requires when you take a mortgage.
Yes.
In all the other cases, the valuation is the property price that the seller decided to put on for this property, or the price that the agent give to you.
Apart from those sort of standard due diligence inquiries we've talked about, there are other things that will sometimes be of concern to a buyer. For example, will I be able to get a license to use this as a restaurant, or has it got good internet speeds, or are there any roads proposed for nearby which are going to ruin the property, and so on. I assume that as a lawyer you can do those things, make those inquiries. Again, they're not common inquiries, but if a client came to you and said, I want to get this stuff checked out, you could do it.
Yes, you can do it, but you need to ask explicitly
Yes.
the lawyer to deal this and that checks,
Yes.
especially in the planning for the roads, for whether the property could be flooded, or other specific inquiries should be done specifically.
Now, I now to turn to a subject which I know is very dear to your heart, and that is lawyers and their professional advice. Assuming you've taken our recommendation that you should always use a lawyer, and some people still won't, but I think they're very foolish, but if you have taken this recommendation, your lawyer should be giving you some advice as to whether it's safe to go ahead and buy this property. And we said that could be just in an email, or it could be by way of a longer report. But it's really important you take that advice, isn't it?
It's very important. I can't imagine being a lawyer, how to go to Spain, for example, and to rely upon the seller or the estate agent. Even know that I know Bulgarian law, I know nothing about Spanish law, for example. Of course, I will use the lawyer there.
And sometimes, and I know lawyers don't like telling the clients that they've wasted money because this property is junk and they shouldn't even think about buying it. But sometimes in Bulgaria you will have to say that. But sometimes the lawyer will say to you that really, this is not a good property to buy. It's not safe. There are lots of other properties for sale. Why don't you go and find another one? And if your lawyer says that to you, you really should follow that advice, or be very brave and not do so.
Yes, sometimes it's better to lose a little deposit that you put already on the property.
Yes.
If your lawyer didn't advise or have not advised you to buy it, and to listen to this advice.
So we've talked a lot about lawyers. How do you find a good lawyer?
That's a good question. Good lawyers are always busy, and this is the individual, I think, decision whether your lawyer is good or bad. Generally speaking, I would recommend to use a lawyer that work on a foreign market. This is my personal opinion, that the lawyers who have an experience working with foreign clients would be better for you to use.
And of course, they may also know something about how things work in your own country, so that they can compare things and help explain things.
Yes, correct. And often such lawyers have been a bit had a maybe limited training, but training in that foreign country that they work at, and they know what exactly you want to achieve with this purchase.
And it's worth, I think, perhaps just saying a little bit about the danger of using lawyers who are recommended by either the seller or the seller's estate agent.
From my point of view, from my practice, I can say that in a lot of cases, when some client come to me with problems relating to his purchase in the past, they were using lawyers that had been recommended by the other party.
And the risk there,
unfortunately,
is that that lawyer is not looking after your interests, but looking after the interests of the person who's recommended him, because he refers lots of clients and you are just one person.
Yes, sometimes they recommend to you something that they think would be attracted for you, like say under declaration. They think maybe that it would be, you will be in interest to do some under declaration, because in Bulgaria it's not a criminal affair.
This is, of course, declaring less than the true value for the price.
Yes, because you want to save some duty stuff. But it's not works for British clients, for example.
It usually produces far more problems than it solves.
Yes, therefore that's why...
As well as probably being illegal in this country.
Yes, that's a separate question.
Yes. Yes. Okay. How much does a lawyer cost?
I find that the price of up to 1,000 euros
for
is
an average property.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Sometimes less. Of course, if you buy property for £5,000 in total, the lawyer still will charge you at least 500 euros because the amount of
Yes.
work is the same that whether you buy for 5 millions.
Yes, exactly
Yeah.
so. Okay, well, that just about brings us to the end of that section, so I hope you've enjoyed it. In a moment, we'll be coming back and looking at the question of contracts, and so we hope to see you again then. Lyubov, thank you.